In three, two, one.
Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, happy Monday. Happy March Madness.
March Madness. I mean, baseball in 2 weeks or so. NBA's back from the break. I don't even like the NBA, man. Not all that much. And I kind of missed it over the weekend, or especially
crazy.
Monday and Tuesday were just like, what are we going to talk about? When you have a daily morning show, like and the NBA goes away, it just creates a stupid void. Because I sure shit ain't talking hockey. I don't know anything about that. So
yeah. I
mean,
was going to say,
we're back.
You can't poo-poo NBA. I mean, look, I don't watch a lot of college basketball. In fact, this regular season, I watched like maybe 5 minutes. I think I saw 5 minutes of one Wisconsin game, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember why I don't watch college basketball. And it got to conference tournament time. I have a role with NBC Sports doing some preview shows. I'm like, okay, I better start to get a little bit of, a feel for this. I watched a lot of college basketball during the All-Star break, a lot during the conference championships. The quality of play in the NBA is so superior. I mean, it's just a better product. It's tough. You can nitpick a couple things about NBA, but man, the quality of play is so much better.
No, for sure. I mean, it's just like, could Alabama beat the Browns and all that? Like, no. These are the best of the best. Like, there's 300 some goddamn teams, and of them, you're putting 15 of those players on 30 franchises. Of course, it is a much better product. I almost consider it two different sports, honestly.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I mean, it's treated way differently. End of game scenarios, way different. 3-point shooting is completely different in a lot of these leagues where it's not the same. The revolution hasn't caught up in some spots of the country yet for 3-point shooting yet. There's a lot of mid-range jumpers, man. And there's some bad coaching. There's some bad decision making. And honestly, a lot of the games just aren't that good to watch to begin with. But conference tournaments were a ton of fun. I enjoyed them. I shouldn't espouse about this. I had a long argument with a bookmaker about a future bet this morning.
Oh, really?
They said Eastern Washington didn't win. Said Southern Utah won, and they showed me the standings. And I said,
no.
I said, well, this was a tournament bet. It doesn't say that anywhere.
What?
I said, well, I bet it. The date. I bet it 4 days after the conference schedule was over. Like it was like,
oh my god,
it was like 45 minutes back and forth with an agent. Very annoying morning. But conference tournaments were a ton of fun. I had a ton of fun. I'm starting to dig into the brackets right now. I was going to blog something tonight. I'm just not ready. I'm going to.
Let's talk about Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll get deeper into that on Wednesday.
Let's get a college basketball guest and do a March Madness deep dive Wednesday, because we have an extra day this year, right?
And we have an extra hour this week.
We have opposite. Somebody stole a fucking hour from us.
Shit.
Yeah.
Man, I'm way off.
Yeah. But we do have an extra day. It doesn't start in earnest until Friday. And so if we put up some content on Wednesday with a college basketball guest, that it'll be
day, you're right.
Yeah, it'll be decent for a day. So we won't get too much into your thoughts specifically on the tour.
No, I don't. And that's what I'm saying. I don't have
thoughts
yet. I'm starting. I have a few beginning thoughts, but I'm gonna take each region and kind of look at it, see if I want to place some. I like those to win the region bets. I think we'll talk about that a bunch on Wednesday. I think there's some nice value there. It's hard to win 6 games, man.
It is. My favorite handicaps are I like the conference props, like the conference rule and over under games, conference versus conference props. I like the sum of the seeds, over under props, how many 1 seeds get in the Final Four, that sort of stuff.
It reminds me of the bowl game props from a few years back.
Exactly.
Those are a ton. God damn it. We're gonna have to get into all those. Those are a ton
I can't
of fun.
wait.
But regardless, And I mean, Sengaroon, I told you this morning, the YouTube channel got banned for basically too much sex appeal, is what they said. So we're throwing off too much fire, and the people can't handle it. So we have to tone it down. I might have to wear a hat more often to hide my hair, but yeah, we're on the YouTube. Go find the BetSperts YouTube account if you want to watch this on YouTube. It's on YouTube right now. I'm just using the BetSperts account. I might just use that going forward because I don't look like I'm getting my account back. So
realistically, somebody probably just mass reported us because we are a threat, and they took away our YouTube account, and I'm pretty upset about it, to be honest with you. I'm holding my breath, hoping that they do the right thing and reinstate us before going nuclear. But yeah, if you want to watch on YouTube, it does present some advantages to Periscope. It's less glitchy, but
it's better.
We're
on Twitch and Facebook right now too, if you want to find an alternate. And of course, this is always out in podcast form eventually, probably tonight. But
yeah,
yes, regarding,
let's set the table. Let's set the table. Go for it.
Speaking of Sengaroon and talking to him this morning about this exact same thing, somebody in the chat on Brown Bag Bets this morning says, "Hey Andy, what win packs?" They didn't say packs, but I was wondering too. They said, "When college basketball is over, what are you going to talk about?" And I said, there's golf, but the timing of the show doesn't really allow me to do daily bets because it's mid-round. So I can talk about golf like 1 or 2 days a week. I said, I may have to get back into, and it's been, I dabble during the majors and I play along. And when I see something glaring, I'll bet it. But I have not modeled nor seriously bet tennis daily for probably a year and a half. Just been very busy with NFL, and honestly doing the podcasts and having a full-time job at the same time it was busy enough just trying to keep up with NFL, college basketball, and then started to add golf. So I didn't really have the time. And I said, I'll do tennis. I might do tennis again. And I have, the March Madness is 3 weeks yet. So I have a few weeks to get my shit together on that. And I looked at it and I'm like, for me, it's almost like handicapping a brand new sport, because not only has it been so long since I've done it that I probably don't even want to go back and find my numbers and what I used, because it was probably trash anyway. I was probably a break-even tennis bettor at best anyway. But also the fact is just it's been so long that I kind of want to just do a fresh start, and I wouldn't even know if I could, if I went and found my old spreadsheets, I don't even know if I'd know what I was looking at. I'm notorious for not labeling things so well. So I'm almost treating it like I haven't handicapped tennis before. I don't know much about tennis, and I'm kind of excited about diving in new. And it got me thinking about this topic. And then, Christ, you brought it up just a bit ago that you don't do much with college basketball, but you had some content to do, so you had to pay attention and start to form a way to look at that. And maybe what I hit on there was pretty prophetic too when I said they're not the same sport, because NBA and college basketball are both played on the same court, but they are not the same sport. They cannot be handicapped the same way, and they're very different. I think the same can be said for ATP and WTA. I don't think men and women's tennis needs to be approached the same way. Obviously, college and pro football. And then I don't know if there's a hockey one. KHL is different. International arenas are bigger.
Sure.
I know that, but no, for anyone who is kind of finding themselves in that, and I think a big one is going to be baseball.
Oh, of course.
And we're not going to be able to sit and tell you how to put together a great baseball model, because man, that's such a data-driven sport now, and there's so much. And we are going to have a baseball guest here very soon. But I think it can be, hopefully what we can go over today can be useful no matter what you're thinking about diving in. If you were going to say, well, I'd like to start doing golf now. I'd like to start doing tennis now. Obviously, baseball in 2 weeks. I'd like to get into baseball and not be an idiot about it. This isn't going to be a pure modeling, because we've done that in the past. This is going to be a preparation, like putting together your checklist and maybe getting yourself prepared, because we talked about this a little off air. It's almost like the modeling podcast we did, where
sure,
I think a lot of the DMs we got after that were kind of in the same ilk, where they all said, I just needed to get my ass in gear. Taking the first couple steps, it snowballed. It was so intimidating building a model. It sounded like something I couldn't do. Once I got it going, I was going. And I think that'll be pretty similar to this.
Yep. Okay. So let's get started then. The first thing, absolutely the first thing that everyone should be thinking of is where do I get some data? And there's a lot of data you need, right? And there are two distinct types of data you need. One type is data about the sport itself, and the other type is data about the betting market, right? You can't go into this with just like, okay, give me all the stats. I'm going to crank it and I'm going to come up with the perfect price. Like, you need more than that. You absolutely have to have a whole second approach where you, okay, give me all of the historical odds. Give me some, some line movement indicators, things like that. Give me some historical matchups. Give me some results that I can take a look at and start to figure out how much is a point worth. How much is a point worth to the side? How much is a point worth to the total? How much is a game worth in tennis to the side, to the handicap, to the total in best of 3 and best of 5, right? Like if you don't have a database of results to answer those questions, then you're already at a disadvantage in terms of coming up with pricing. But most people kind of think of the first half of that, which is I want data. I want like some inputs that I can plug into a model. Right. I want to train some sort of regression. I need some inputs for that. And that's pretty obviously an important first step. But I think there are massive distinctions in quality of data, right? Quantity is not always key. Like, you want quality data. And to me, there are a couple of huge indicators for what I would qualify as quality data. I want stuff that has been adjusted for tempo in basketball. That was the first thing that I went to look for. I was like, I don't want like, points per game, rebound percentage, offensive rebound percentage, free throw percentage, 3-point percentage. Like, yeah, I guess that stuff is kind of useful. And, you can add a little flair to your model with that sort of stuff if you can figure out what matters. But much more important is you want stuff that's been normalized a little bit, so that it's all equal, especially for something like college basketball, where you're taking teams that play in different conferences and you're mashing them all up, right? Like, I can tell you just from looking at the data, the Big Ten plays a very different style of basketball than the Big 12. I mean, completely different.
It's like the net rating joke I made a week or so ago about how net rating had Colgate as the 9th best team in the country out of is it Patriot or Colonial? One of those. It's a tiny league up in the Northeast. Colonial is not a 2 seed. They're not a 3 seed. Or Colgate. They're a very good team in their conference, and it fools the efficiency ratings the way that net puts things together. But that's where an adjusted efficiency rating, something that normalizes the data, is super important. And
the two key things are pace and quality of opponent. Strength of schedule. Those are the two huge ones. And if you can find someone who is routinely addressing those in their data reduction process before posting, then they have saved you an enormous step, right? Because strength of schedule matters. If you're, like you said, if your net rating is amazing, but you've played the worst, 10 teams in college basketball over and over again for 3 months, great. We don't really know how good you are relative to an average team. Like, that's all that really matters is you want to know how good it is relative to an average team. Right.
That's the toughest part about your little example you just gave there. Like, you can say, oh, this team had a terrible strength of schedule and they played very, very well. They beat the shit out of this bad team. They're not as good as we think they are. Well, that's not a very concrete answer. That answers one thing, but it does not solve any of your problems, because they're not as good as they show on paper, but you have no idea how good. Like, you have no idea, without adjusting for that, you can just say, well, they're not as good as that. Well, how much worse are they? Like, unless you can actually find a way to adjust for it and figure out, with the strength of schedule, some sort of normalization, you don't know shit yet. And it sucks. And there's a lot of stats out there where it's like, well, this is useless because it's just against whoever. Or, it's like taking all the stats from NFL after week 1 and saying, well, this is the best team. Well, they played the Jets, Andy. Like, are they really the best team? Stats say they're the best team. Until you can, and that's what's the toughest part about the NFL is once you have that first week, you don't really know who's super bad, who's super good. A lot of guesswork involved there. But I mean, yeah, a big thing would be to find the quality of data, especially, in a sport and it's going to be different for every sport. It's going to be in baseball. There's a lot of people that do splits. We have a lineup that just can't hit worse shit versus I'm not big into baseball, so I'm going to butcher some of this stuff. But, I do talk to baseball guys enough, and these guys against a lefty, it's a bad look, even though it looks like they should be a little higher priced here. They're taking pitching, they're taking umpiring, they're taking, even a lot of that is down to the player level data. But I mean, some of that stuff is just, you can't, if you don't adjust it for something, honestly, it's more than just qualitative. There's quantitative aspects that if you don't adjust it, your numbers are going to be shit. And I think the like you said, it's a shortcut when in your first step, because this is your data gathering step is such a big step, and it's such a pain in the butt as you dig through sites. And I think it kind of bleeds over into networking, because if you can ask some questions like that, that's a huge shortcut in here is, hey, where do you get your stats from? Or where's a good place to find this? I've had people answer that question 24 times for me and find websites I've never heard of and places where they find things. And I still use some of those places. Like just definitely network, ask around, talk to people, figure out where other people are getting their stuff, other people are pulling their stuff, where people are finding, starting pitching, where people are finding lineup cards soon, where people are finding which goalie's out. Like sometimes it's just a Twitter account they follow. Like this guy is always going to let you know, this one thing that you need to know before you can actually make a final number on a game. So the information and data gathering part is pretty time consuming, but it's like the pyramid, man, that foundation. If you're going to start the sport, you got to have a good foundation to start on.
That's right. And if you're going to go out and get your data for tennis, you want to think about normalizing it for a quality of opponent. Somebody's just destroying it on the Challenger Tour. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have that same success at the pro level, at the top level. Similarly, you're going to want to normalize it for surface that they're playing on, because the different court speeds matter for tennis, and thinking through that stuff, normalizing it all for the macro conditions that have first order impact on the results is huge. And so for basketball, for me, the things I was looking for are schedule, strength of schedule adjusted and tempo adjustment, because those help kind of start to help provide some focus, and help make comparisons, because ultimately you're going to want to create a winning percentage, a probability of team A beating team B. That's the whole point. You want that win percentage, and then from that you can convolve that into a spread, a projected score, all kinds of things you can do. But the step one really should be, what's a fair money line price here? So I would take a look at the options that are available. Most people probably assume like I have to go to ESPN or CBS or NBC or something like that to get like the data itself. But in the case of college basketball, Ken Palm obviously decided, hey, I'm going to provide numbers for free for everyone that are adjusted for tempo, adjusted for strength of schedule, and that's a great place to start. Although, of course, once it becomes ubiquitous across the gambling community, then you're not going to necessarily find an edge against the market if everyone is also using that. So you got to be a little bit more intuitive, have a nuanced approach in terms of what you're doing with that data. But still, it doesn't change the fact that, like, if you're starting from scratch, if you're starting fresh, if I'm going to go build a golf model, I need to start somewhere by scraping some data. And again, like, data about the sport is important, but I would say equally as important to me is historical odds.
Yeah, I was just going to say it almost marries into what we had when we spoke with Matthew Trenhale a couple weeks ago.
Sure.
And, this is kind of getting off of what you just brought up, but we'll come back to it, is not only historical odds, but understanding the market. Understanding where the market opens, who opens it, how long before a match, and it's so different in every sport as far as, if you don't understand where the market originates and how it moves throughout the time from origination to, tip, kick, whatever, first pitch, I think you're going to be having some problems as well, because you won't be able to back test. You need to compare your numbers, and that goes right hand in hand with going and getting some opening and closing lines from the past. But it really is going to just differ so greatly from sport to sport, because like in golf, the lines are going to come out. You're going to have a few days. With football, there's like a week. It's something, and we're going to keep leaning on tennis because that's something I'm going to be into. Tennis is a tricky one because, and anyone who's watched, Brown Bag and watched Alex try to handicap some of these North American tournaments, he's like, here's what I'd make this line, but they're playing right now, and they don't have order of play out for tonight yet or for tomorrow. That they're in these tournaments when there's only one day between a match. That they're not going to set a line for the next match, obviously, until you know who plays in it. And then, of course, somebody has to originate that. And then it's never going to be somebody, I say this in a generalization, but for the most part, it's not going to be somewhere you can bet. Like we talked about this tiny checkbook or marathon bets. I mean, these crazy outs in weird places in Eastern Europe are going to open some of these tennis markets, and you're going to have to sit there and look at it. And I think a lot of people do just chase steam off that and are probably halfway successful. But understanding when a market opens, where it opens, why it opens, and why it moves. Because if you continually see a market open, let's say, even if it's somewhere you can't bet, if you see it open at Marathon or whatever the name of that checkbook was,
sure,
and you make someone let's say you make someone a decent favorite. It opens that way, and it moves strongly against you time and time again. Like, you can learn way more about anything than from the stats, I'd say.
Of course.
Like, definitely, if you can watch those, and that's the problem with just opening it up on DraftKings when it's up 8 hours later.
Sure.
And you just say, oh man, it opened here, so I show value. Like, no, it opened the other way and it moved there. Like, really understanding, and even down to what the limits are at some of those books. If you can get down and do some of that research, figure out who's betting it, how much, and what it takes to get it there. I think that's super understated in a lot of markets. And it's different in a market like tennis, where you only have a short period of time to mature a market compared to, we understand the NFL cycle so well from just betting it for a couple of years and watching it and paying attention. I think that's behooved us greatly, and it can in any sport, and that's something you need to nail down right away.
Sure. Yeah. Well, this is kind of outside of the actual coming up with your own number. It is I completely agree. God damn. You really want to know who opens this number first. When do limits go up? Yes. When does the market really start to move? Who are the most influential players that are playing into this market? When are they betting? Like, that's obviously very tough to figure out, but you get a sense of it. If you're playing at if you're limit betting, like you'll start to figure that stuff out pretty quickly. But yeah, no, that idea, that concept is hugely important. Like, understanding the market you're getting involved in, and in fact, like, even before you go to the trouble of trying to build a model with the data you download, it is very straightforward. If you have a 2-week sample of closing numbers for teams that are playing often, daily, college basketball, NBA, whatever, if you have a couple of weeks of closing lines, you can back out of that what the average market power rating might be. And honestly, you can do pretty well knowing nothing about the sport, nothing about the players, and nothing about, not having any normalized data at all. If you have a set of market power ratings and you're just looking at the opens and you're looking at the market power rating, you're like, oh, that's weird. They adjusted this by 2 points. I wonder why. Let's dig into this. Is this an overreaction? Are we buying low on a certain team here because the market adjusted 2 points away from them for no reason, because they played, they lost by 40 points last time out on Sunday when they didn't have all their starters in. That sort of stuff is real. Is a really nice and interesting way of getting involved in the first place. in my opinion. And yeah, I think that was the first thing. That was the first thing I did for college basketball. I just got as many of the closing lines as possible, so I could start to get a sense of within any given conference what's the power rating range here.
Yeah,
and then from there you can transfer that that knowledge directly into the opening lines you see on any given game. So yeah.
And I think it's funny that you brought it up, and I'm not dogging on you here because I would have done the same if I hadn't watched much. And truthfully, I did the same because I don't watch all that much college basketball. I got a high maintenance wife. I got 2 kids. I've got a farm. Not really a farm. I don't do any farming, but it's a big yard. There's a lot of snow.
It's the winter.
Yeah. It's the winter time. And I have a job. There's a lot of things going on. I don't watch nearly as much sports as I'd like to, and especially college basketball. I don't get a chance. I'll watch half a game in the evening sometimes if I get a chance. So I actually sat down and watched a lot more basketball than I normally did for conference tournament preview or conference tournament time. And it's funny what maybe some people who thought that should have been the first step. Like, shouldn't you just watch a shitload of the sport? And it does hit a certain point when you talked about that. If you had 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month of data, opening and closing lines, and saw how they moved and just used those to back out some power numbers, that would be much more beneficial than sitting down and going full Tweety Dimes and watching every pitch of an entire MLB season, which he didn't do. That's hilarious.
No.
I mean, it's the green lumber fallacy. And if anybody, sure. I believe that might be part of Anti-Fragile. One of the best commodity traders or something. He was really good at trading green lumber, had no idea what green lumber was. He thought it was painted green. It means that, it was fresh cut. Yeah. And this guy didn't even know what he was trading, but he understood the market so well that it didn't matter. And I think that's paramount to everything you're trying to do here. And if you don't really have a grasp on what the market thinks of a team, it might not matter what you think of a team. In the short term, you might find some luck, but if you can't, you will have to disagree with the market. That's not to say the market knows better than you. For the most part, it will. But you will find small edges here and there. But if you don't have a baseline of understanding what the market thinks of teams or players or, race cars, what have you, then it's going to be a struggle down the road. And I think that's probably baseline number 2 is setting up what the market does. You do a great job of that every year for football when you take the opening numbers from CG and back them out into,
sure.
Here's what they think, and it's funny because it's by week 2. Some of these numbers are hilarious once they've made their adjustments. But, in the summer, we know what the books think of teams relative to each other by taking, 16, 17 weeks of football numbers and just backing out the power rankings by them. And it's the same thing. You can do that in season. You can do that right now with the NBA.
You can do it right now. And I guess let's just describe that real quick.
Yes.
If I take the last 200 NBA games and I take all the closing lines and I take all the closing totals, I can put them in an Excel sheet. You don't need advanced kind of computational framework for this. You could put them in an Excel sheet. You index an offensive and a defensive rating for every team. Okay. And you can use as a guess, just average, just 100, the average total in an NBA game is 224.
Is that true?
What's that?
Is that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You can guess that. You can start with a guess that every team's offensive rating is 112. Every team's defensive rating is 112. That's a fine place to start. Right. And then what you do is you create a residual between your guess and what the actual closing number was. And you can get that by basically saying, okay, the line ought to be the difference between the average of the offense and the defense for each side. And of course, if you start with 112, you're going to get 0. But if the closing line is actually 9, well, then you have to adjust one or both of your numbers. Okay. And then if your guess total was 224, because you're now taking the average plus the average of the offensive and defensive rating plus the average of the offensive and defensive rating, you get 224. Well, the total is actually 229. So you now know you're off in which direction. Like this team should be better than this team. This offensive rating should be higher or this defensive rating should be lower, right? So you're getting information from that, calculating those residuals. And then you can do this for 200 games. And then Excel has a function called solver, where if you take the sum of the residuals and you say, hey, Excel, you see all those offensive and defensive ratings over there? I want you to guess what those are, but you're going to do it in a way that you make that sum of the residuals as small as possible. And you say, okay, that sounds fair. Solve it, 5,000 iterations, whatever. Okay, this is the set of offensive and defensive ratings that matches the market the most closely. And if you even want to be a little bit more complex and you want to say, okay, well, I actually really want to squish out the outliers here. Well, you can look at the sum of the squares of the error there. And if you want to, keeping in mind like a positive and a negative should be eliminated, right? Like you don't care about sign. You just want to know magnitude of the number being off. Then you look at the sum of the square of the error, minimize that. You're going to get a set of ratings that reflect what the market thinks about all these teams on average. Now, are there going to be random ones in there where some team didn't have their star player on a given night, and so instead of a -4, they were +9? Absolutely, you're going to have examples like that. And you can specifically kind of go through, and if you're following the sport closely enough, you're not including those in this exercise anyway. But, for the sake of just kind of a general understanding of the market, this is a hugely valuable exercise to come up with sort of an average. On average, this is what the market thinks of these teams. Now, it's valuable because a market reflects the opinions of thousands of people. Any opinion you generate yourself and bring into this exercise is not going to be as robust as the market.
It's a sat.
You're one.
It's a 100 millionth of a.
Yes.
And it's true. And it's funny. This kind of jogs some memories too. The way you do that, there are ways to do this outside of Excel. R has this functionality too. Solver is great. Just a little shine for friend of the pod and just overall good guy and fellow Minnesotan, Eric Eager. And I'm not even sure if he does this anymore, but he was working with DataCamp a little because he's with Pro Football Focus. We've had him on the podcast. I'm pretty sure we had him on this year to talk football.
Yeah,
we done
talked
his
to him before the divisional round games.
Yeah, I was trying to remember which playoff round it was, but Eric Eager has worked with DataCamp, and he put together, I think it's just his linear algebra class. It was free, like they made this stuff free during the pandemic, which
I don't have to pay $2,999.
Yeah, it's funny. The timing is of people harping on some of these the DataCamp stuff is much cheaper than that. And if anybody does want to learn how to do stuff like this, there are classes some of these classes are like $50 for some of the, none of them more than a couple hundred if you want to take a decent math class. But like to do something like this, to learn how to do something like this in R, he had a DataCamp class for it. Like I said, it was free last year. I don't know how much it costs now, but definitely something to look for if it's, something you want to do, something you're interested in, because honestly, and I won't comment on that class. I think it's too expensive. I actually DM'd the guy. I'm like, hey, how much, what's this class all about? And I was thinking it was going to be, I didn't think it was going to cost that much. And I'm like, thanks. I'll look at it. And the timing, what day it is. I didn't like that either. So I passed on that. But, I've taken some classes through, not DataCamp, but a few of the places that offer things like edX and stuff like that for like $60-$70. You can, what's it called when you don't actually get credit for it? You're just like demoing the class.
You're auditing.
Yeah, I've audited plenty of classes for much less than what it would actually cost, because I don't give a shit about a credit. It's not going on a resume. But something like that would be much more beneficial than almost anything else you can learn on Twitter or anything from us, honestly, to take one of these and learn how to do this and back out those numbers, because it's a goddamn key. Like it unlocks a lot. It unlocks a lot about the market. You'll have an instant great understanding about how the market feels about every team.
Yeah. And
do that.
Like there's no lines up for tomorrow's NBA, but I want to start thinking about those games. Well, guess what? I have a market set of power ratings that I can look at and say, okay, we're probably going to get these. All right. And then I can run my own numbers that are a little bit of a tweak away from that. You can see where there are differences. You can see where there are gaps. You can start to facilitate some handicap around that. And, you have ideas of positions that you may want to take before you even have a market available to bet into. This is a valuable, and realistically, like you know how valuable this is in the NFL. You know it. How fun and how interesting and how helpful is it when the playoffs start to think about, okay, when the Ravens play the Chiefs, what kind of line are you going to get? Right? What's that line going to be? Thinking about this sort of stuff ahead of time and having a set of, market set of ratings so that you can be prepared to find the right side, because you shouldn't necessarily just say, I'm blank at any price, right? Or if you do, you better know damn well you're doing it paying a premium. I've made bets when I knew I was paying a premium. Sure, of course. Not often. You do it too often, you're going to find yourself in trouble. But, surely there are certain, instances where, you want to side because of blank qualitative angle, and you're willing to pay a point or 2 points premium. Sure.
You're doing the NBA. And I think it's such an interesting example because you have your numbers. Let's say Drew has done all this because he has. He knows generally if the Lakers and the Rockets play tomorrow at the Staples Center,
it'll be a 15-point spread.
He knows what the spread is going to be. Spread opens, it's 15-20% off what he thinks it should be. Instantly, he knows somebody knows something about it. Either that or it's instantly bet off that. Somebody knows something. There's some injury news that's not out yet. Someone's sitting. Something's happened. I need to either tread lightly, or if I think I know what's going on, I need to hammer the shit out of this. Instantly, if you know where the market should be, if you know where the market sentiment has been, will be, and is going to be in the future, and it doesn't open there, then you can really start digging in on something, because something is amiss. And in the NBA, maybe not a better example of that with, why is this total? Who's sitting? What's going on?
Yeah, great example. CJ McCollum comes back for Portland tomorrow.
Yeah.
Portland is playing the New Orleans Pelicans. There is no lineup. If I take my average market power rating for Portland, which is based on the last handful of games that they've played without him, I'm going to get a line that's in favor of the Pelicans, likely, if they've correctly factored in McCollum coming back and his impact on that team, that team level expectation. And I can look at that number and I can say, oh, I got 2 points value on the Pelicans. Sweet. Or I can say, okay, well, you better dig in here. Oh, it looks like McCollum's back. Okay. That's why this number is what it is. And then you can even go a step further and say, well, is 2 points reasonable? Should it be more? Is that too much? How much impact is he even going to be? Let's read some coaches' notes. Are they going to give him a full complement of minutes? Is he going to come off the bench? Is he going to start? It's all of this is important. You need a starting point for all this, because if you're rolling up an hour before tip and you're looking at the spreads and you're like, well, I like that team. They're doing well. They're hot. They're on a streak. I'll bet them. You're not going to, you're going to get beat by a tortoise in a gambling competition. So I would absolutely.
You're referencing everything.
Well, there's a lot going on in the world of gambling Twitter. It's been a fun month so far. But yeah, it's pretty, it's starting from a fresh start. The idea of getting data that you can use to kind of facilitate building out and, coming up with the number, the idea of collecting historical odds to build market power ratings is huge. The third thing I want to bring up is let's research what has been kind of commonly written about handicapping this sport. Let's do a little literature review, for lack of a better word, right? I'm going to start handicapping college basketball, or that's college basketball, a bad example. I'm going to start handicapping baseball this year. What's home field advantage in baseball? I don't know. It's not 3 runs, right? It's not like 3 points in football. We're going to give them 3 runs in baseball. No way, right? Somebody's probably researched this, though. Wouldn't you say? Well, let's do a little literature review on what home field advantage is in baseball. Oh, actually, you know what? it's even more complicated than just literature review of home field advantage is worse this in terms of a winning percentage. There's actually park factors where, depending on how the park was actually constructed, it favors a team with this type of hitter versus a team with this type of hitter, a team with this type of pitcher versus a team with this type of pitcher. Like, is it a day game or is it a night game? Where's the sun angle? Like, there is an enormous library of literature that has already looked into this and covering this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And like all the sports that we talked about that aren't played, and we'll throw hockey in there, even though I know that international arenas are bigger. But for the most part, NHL hockey is going to be played, and they all weren't the same size back in the 70s. I found that out once, blew my goddamn mind that the ice was different sizes at some point in the NHL. But for the most, football, basketball, the courts are the same. There's some stiff rims, there's some weird sight lines in certain arenas, yes, but for the most part, it is the same damn thing. We've all seen the scene in Hoosiers where they measure the rim. But golf, different courses, tennis, different surfaces, obviously different, and that's something you can throw into football too, is temperature, weather. But, golf and tennis can definitely be affected by temperature and weather. Altitude, big in tennis and certain junctures. And the same thing, like you said, and, obviously we have Denver in every major sport too, if you want to talk altitude, or college basketball, there's some high up schools, but, all these different things that you start throwing in, there's going to be, it's not like you're the first person to figure out, like, what's the difference between Bay Hill and, the other Florida courses. Like, there's multiple hundreds of articles previewing every course, previewing every tennis tournament. Start digging into those and figure out, what does everybody else know? Because not only should I be caught up to that, but I should start looking at and throwing out how much of this is probably horse shit.
Yes.
It's like 80. It's the principle, or what's the Pareto principle? Am I trying to think? What's the 80-20 rule? Something like that.
Oh yeah.
But 80-20, baby. A lot of it is trash. I mean, you're going to go read 10 previews for this Honda golf tournament. Like, it's going to be the same thing over and over. I'm going to do a show tomorrow. I'm going to say the same thing that all of them say. Like, it's the same thing. Like, it's just talking points. Like, a lot of it is just informational. This is what the course looks like. It's a really hard par 70. Every single article you're going to read, it's a really hard par 70. It's a difficult course. It can get windy. Everybody knows these things. The people that are beating some of these markets are digging way deeper into stuff like that. But you need to know what everybody else knows, and you need to start figuring out, like I said, how much of it is horse shit, I think.
Of course. And if you haven't done step 1 and 2, if you don't have team level, player level data that's normalized, if you don't have historical odds and market information, then you get to step 3, you do your literature review. You have no way of testing any of this for yourself.
No.
You're just at the whims of whoever wrote it. And it could, 80-20 is, when it comes to sports betting, it might be more. It might be 50-50, 20-80. I wouldn't be surprised.
I was going 80% horse shit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no,
okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, and a lot of this stuff has been written about in the past. A lot of it is, there's a lot of useful reading out there, and Google is a phenomenal resource for a lot of this stuff. There are a handful of books out there that have been written over the years that are still relevant. Like, there are a lot of good concepts and topics available in the handful of well-written, well-read gambling literature, for lack of a better word. And all that stuff is a great place to start because, yes, all of these concepts have been beaten into the market, but yes, if you don't know what the concepts are, and then you're the one that's holding the bag, you're paying the tuition to learn it the hard way. Is that a fair way to say it?
If a course or a course play is difficult for certain kinds of golfers, if a park is really tough on a certain type of hitter, if a surface at a certain, a surface combined with weather, let's say hard courts in the sweltering sun are very good for a certain type of tennis player, and you are not understanding that you need to be factoring in these things, as a baseline number for some of this stuff, you will be at the will. So, I mean, I kind of harped on that green lumber fallacy and said, don't just sit and watch a shitload of tennis or don't watch, any sport. I still think that's true. I still think just that's where the networking comes in, because that's not the sort of stuff you can just sit and research. I mean, a lot of it you can. I'd say that's another 80-20. Like 80% of the park factors and stuff you can find an article and read about. But that last 20% about maybe figuring out, let's stick with baseball. Figuring out umpires. I know a lot of people use umpires in their handicapping. Figuring out, like, if you just want to take that and break that down, like, how much does an umpire matter to a game? Like the far ends of, let's say we're using it for totals. Who's the best over umpire? Who's the best worst over umpire? Best under umpire? Do they matter as much with every kind of pitcher? Or are they, only beneficial to certain types of pitchers, certain types of hitters, certain teams? Is this sample size just small and doesn't mean anything? How do you actually weigh this with your numbers? How much does it actually matter towards a side? And then also, the key step, where do I find any of this information? Is there somebody? How many times have I sat and banged my head against the wall pulling information from like 5 different places, and then somebody's like, oh yeah, there's a website for that, and of course some off the wall website that somebody that's just keeping track of this data and putting it a lot of times just out there for free, and you can find something silly like umpire data, or you got to stop looking at the charts, they're not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bounce back.
Maybe.
Minor setback, major comeback.
Asia's sell-off right now is just absolutely thunder effing Bitcoin.
We need to cut the power to China.
Okay. The fourth, maybe most, I think this is valuable for getting started. But the likelihood that you're going to wade into the water in a major sport and find an edge betting sides with no previous experience, it's pretty damn low. But you know what you can do while you figure out sides, while you start to track your numbers, while you start to track even hypothetical positions you would take, you can bet the derivatives. You can bet some props. You can bet some props. There's no reason that you can't build a baseball model out to price totals. Let's say you're a weather guy. Let's say you're really into weather and you're like, you know what? Like, I have a better feel for weather than the average person. I know how important weather is to baseball totals. I'm going to build a baseball total model. Ready, freaking go. Well, it's going to take you a little while to get usable betting, bettable. It's going to take you a while to find your edge there, because there are a lot of other weather guys who are doing that, and they're doing it well. They're making the market, and they're winning money year in, year out, and they will continue to do it forever. But you can find a niche. You can find, your angle if you work hard at it. But in the meantime, bet some yes/no first inning props. Like, that's a market that's only going to take $250 or something. Like that, there are not a lot of people out there who can realistically long-term really shape that market. So give that a crack, right? You want to start betting sides in baseball. You want to start making prices on teams for given pitchers, but you want to collect a little data first. Well, handicap the strikeout market for the pitchers, right? Like you actually want to start building pitcher numbers. Well, get going at that. Come up with some angle that identifies value at a first 5 line versus a full game line. Like attack some of the weaker markets, find some of the softer spots to make your original foray into this. And for all that you might enjoy doing that better ultimately than betting the sides or totals anyway.
It is a lot of fun. Derivatives and props are fun. And that's the point too. If you're going to jump into a brand new sport, you're likely not going to be max betting a major market side or total off the bat anyway. So might as well just, limits shouldn't be an issue then. Bet a derivative, bet a prop. There's people that handicap first quarter NBA, third quarter NBA, strikeout totals, home runs, hits. What is it? Hits, RBIs, and runs. I think is
hits.
Hits, runs, and RBIs. See, it's like rebounds, points, and assists, but for baseball, I think it's hits, runs, and RBIs.
It's not hits.
So like a home run is 3.
Hits, runs, errors. Oh no,
No,
For
hits,
a
runs,
player?
and hits, runs, and errors is an actual.
that's for a
prop
team. Yeah.
for the game. Yeah. Well, usually they'll set a total for the game. I'm not sure if they do it by team. That'd be interesting too. But hits, runs, and RBIs, that's a common one you see for MLB. I think a lot of people, especially if you have any DFS background, I think you could probably do pretty well in them. And that's well said. Start with something small like that while you're monitoring stuff. That it kind of takes the starch off of paper betting. Like we've talked about this in previous episodes. You should maybe paper bet first. That sucks. It's no fun. You don't really have action. You don't have any skin in the game. You can't trick your brain into thinking you have skin in the game when you're paper betting. It doesn't matter. So having a little bit does help, I think. And yeah, like you said, there's always a derivative or a prop that is, correlated enough to what you're trying to come up with in the end that you can probably just take your numbers and trickle it down to that.
Okay. I agree with all of this, and betting into these as a starting place is, that may be the most valuable kind of conceptual jumping off point we can give you here. And I think, again, in general, or let's say, hey, I don't really feel comfortable making a number on these teams or adjusting off of the market until I've seen a lot of these games. So I'm going to watch a lot.
Yeah, or at least forward testing, like saying, here's
Right.
my number, here's the market number. I want to look at that box score at the end.
Sure.
And see how close the metric, I want to look at a bunch of box scores with a bunch of numbers and see how close the metrics were over a decent sample size to my forward projecting metrics, not just, back testing.
I was going to go so far as to say, well, if you want to make your time worthwhile while you're watching the game, watch the live market. Get a sense of
Yes.
how the live market reacts to, the Jazz have a 4-point lead at the end of the first quarter, or they got an 8-point lead at halftime. Okay, well, what's going on with the live number if the pregame line was 10? Right? Like, is it moving towards it? Is it gone up to 12? What's the dynamic factors at play there? Getting a sense of how a live
time
market
decay.
moves.
Yeah.
And not betting into it, but and honestly, like, a great way to keep track, just write down the number. Like, hey, every 5 minutes comes by, or every commercial, not commercial break, but every time out, this is the score. This is the line. This is the score. This is the line. This is the score. This is the line. Like, just that activity of writing that down every time you hit the, some major, marker where you could put a decent sized bet in, you'll get a feeling of what the dynamic fabric of a given market looks like. And you'll get a feel for, what the appetite is for a given team one way or the other. Right. Like,
because it's not all just time decay and algorithms. Like, some of it is definitely, like you said, the appetite for a team, how the market is getting bet, because the live markets they swing pretty hard based on, there's some people that can get some pretty big numbers down. Like, Bookmaker takes some decent money on live bets. There's a few other places too. And I think I kind of want to backtrack too, to the derivative and prop market people. Like, if you're the kind of person who has like 20 outs, or even like 8 to 10 different offshores, or somebody in a legal state that isn't banned yet and has a bunch of different legal options, some offshores, maybe some locals, if you get off on price shopping, you're gonna fucking love props, because they're even just like, and this is not something I handicap, it's something I'd like to get more into, and I do it lightly, but for the most part I just rely on my guy Tim, or Alex does it too, and he has some pretty good numbers. But first touchdown markets, I open up like 6 different books for that, because there's a few that are just shit, and after a few times I shopped, it's like, well, they're never going to have the best number. This is just a bad book. But there's like 5 or 6 that I'll look at, and it's wild the differences you'll find in some of these prop markets. I think a lot of times you'll find this, like, man, I really like over 6.5 strikeouts -110, and you shop at 5-6 places, there's going to be somebody that has like a +110. Like, there's just big differences, stuff you're not usually seeing, stuff you'll never see for the most part in sides and totals. Like, when you're price shopping, you might find something that's 5 cents better. Like
Yeah.
for the most, all the time, you're finding stuff in these prop markets. It's way better. So I think it's a good exercise in doing that too, and just making the most of your bets, even at smaller limits. So
Yeah, I completely agree with this. And in doing so, you're going to figure out what, again, we talked a little bit about knowing who opens the line first, who's the originator, when is the real movement happening, right? When do the circles come off? Who has the smallest hold on any given prop or any given market is important to know, because that's your market making book. Generally, who has
good point.
who has I would even go so far as to say, I guess the market making book that's a generalization.
It's a generalization, and it's tough unless you're sitting and taking opening and closing numbers at a dozen books for
Sure.
a big period of time. That's a big undertaking, but for the most part, that's more of that does turn more into a networking problem, where you can just finally realize, like, oh, like golf. It's like, yeah, bookmaker has the sharpest numbers for the most part. Whereas, like, if I'm betting head to head and I look at three places, and bookmaker has the worst number of it, they're charging me the most to bet that, I can find a better price somewhere else. Like, I'm excited about that. Like, the fact that bookmaker is the worst of the number, that's great, because ideally in the golf market should be one of the sharpest. And the fact that when I do have one of those and it's the opposite, and I see bookmaker has the best price, I don't feel as good. That means
they want my money. Ooh,
that means they want my money on this, which means they're taking decent money or enough money on the other side. And that does give me some pause once in a while. Usually it's such a small difference that it doesn't bother me a lot, but it's kept me off a bet or two, where it's like, oh boy, they're way off. What are we doing? They really want to take some action on the other side of this, and I'm that guy. Like, you don't want to be holding that bag. So yeah, that's maybe a smaller part as you progress on, but understanding who is the market maker, where are the big bets coming in, who has the sharpest numbers, and why should you respect that?
Yeah. No, I'm 100% there. Oh boy. Well, I think that's pretty fair. We're almost at an hour. I think. Were there any questions you really wanted to get to? Oh, do not bid any ETH on the whale punks. That was fun. That's a fun joke. We're not going to say they're not for sale. I don't care how much you're.
We'll burn them before we let you have them.
Yeah.
And you know what? This would be a good. Maybe we'll do like an Ask Me Anything or a Q&A with this in the next couple of weeks. As I bet some questions roll in on this. People trying to figure out some of these things for themselves. And like Drew said, we're going to do some basketball this week. We're going to touch on baseball next week. So we'll have some good conversations about some sports here going forward that aren't football, as we slide into April and we get probably a little deeper into draft stuff again.
Yeah, that's going to be great fun. I'm excited for that. And
free agency's been fun.
Yeah, it really has. A lot going on, man. A lot of commentary, but I'll save it until all of the chips have fallen.
Yeah, there's still a lot of pieces. I mean, basically the whole wide receiver market is still in flux.
Yeah. Okay, March Madness preview on Wednesday?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Any early looks from the mid majors that you think I need to know before the market moves too much?
I don't remember shit being mushed this much. I don't believe in mushes or Twitter mushes or people, the public piling on a team. But Christ, like, yeah, we get it. Ohio, Oregon State, like, people, there's just a few teams everybody loves, and it's probably going to be like those, there's like 4 teams that people want to bet on or fade. They probably go 2-2. So I guess bet them all, lose a little juice. But yeah.
What do you think, though, in general, though, about March Madness and the public moving the number? They don't know.
It happens every year. I mean, there's so much volume on some of these. It's just going to happen no matter what the limits are. And I mean, it's a highly bet market. It's a lot of fun. And, I think you see a lot of movement early on these because it's a tricky market to price.
Yeah.
I bet I bet you get a bookmaker to admit that pretty easily, where he said, like, I mean, these teams don't play each other. It's like it's like
they're not trying to take stands. They're not trying to take stands. They're gonna let volume move this thing around.
Yeah,
they're gonna let water find its
fine,
level. Yeah.
More than fine letting the market dictate who's gonna be the sharp side on one of these or where it moves to. So these are if you have good numbers in basketball, they're more than happy to take your money on these early. Circa was taking 10 G's a pop on the side right off the bat. So I mean, there's some people that did bet into these markets hard, heavy right away, and you're going to see numbers move a lot. So kind of keep track of that. Grab openers on this March Madness stuff. If you missed it, grab openers for the second round. As soon as those start popping up, grab them, try to figure them out. There's plenty of websites where you can look and go back and see what these open at as well. You can go figure this out pretty quickly, a game by game basis. Go do that, figure out where the money's coming in, see if you agree with that, and have some fun. Bet some the props that we'll talk about Wednesday. Bet some regional futures. Don't get too nuts in the future pricing right now. A lot of that stuff is just good. Like, those numbers are good. Gonzaga's overpriced. Gonzaga shouldn't be 2-1, but I mean, even at that, like, you gonna lay the minus 250 on the other side. It's not a bad number. It's actually they were only taking $100 on it, but
I mean, the problem is they got to buy to the Final Four.
Essentially, they do. They're my only. And I know they're dead because they're my only future.
No, come on.
Although I'd cashed Virginia 2 years ago, so I'm on a heater.
Okay, cool.
We're riding it.
All right, with that, we'll call this an episode, and we will be back to talk March Madness in its glory, in its entire glory on Wednesday night. Sound good? Little Calcutta in the air. Looks like we get a little March Madness Calcutta. I might use Wednesday's pod as predominantly as research for the Calcutta. I think
we need to figure out where these props are that you're talking about. The one seed or the sum of the seed thing really intrigues me. I like those.
Oh yeah, that's always one of my favorites.